everyone. I'm Erica Ellis from Living Joyfully, and I'm joined by my co-hosts Anna Brown and Pamela Rickia. And today we're diving into another unschooling stumbling block, which is transitional ages and seasons. And I'm really excited for this conversation. But before we begin, I wanted to give a quick plug to the Living Joyfully Network, which has really been life-changing for me in so many ways. On the network, we have amazing discussions about so many topics since our community has such a wide variety of experiences. And I just love the community so much because everyone there is really learning and growing and being so intentional with their families. And I think it can just be such a wonderful support, especially during this kind of back to school season when questions and fears sometimes come up. And so if you'd like to learn more about the network and check it out for yourself, you can visit livingjoyfullyshop.com and click on the community tab. We also have a link in the show notes, and we would love to meet you. So Pam, would you like to get us started?
Sure, I absolutely would. And yeah, I am really looking forward to diving into these transitional ages and seasons because in our experience, not to speak for you, but many conversations that we had, alongside like families that I have talked to over the years, talked to on the podcast, talked to in the network. We have really seen it play out in many, many different unschooling families over the years, that there are patterns of like these transitional seasons or ages as our children just move through these different stages of their lives. And these can be challenging times for our child and for us as things change, because, change change is a constant, but also like a challenge because we're figure new things out, right? And I just want to mention it's less about actual ages, like we're not going to say at this age or at this age, what your child should know at. But it's more about when the particular child experiences the shift, but that these shifts are often just are part of life. So that's why we really wanted to dive into them. And we thought we'd start with the transition from toddler to child. And now thinking back, it's been a while now, but with younger kids, a lot of our time and effort is taken up with hands-on care, right? From changing diapers to making food to managing toys and games and keeping them occupied. And their learning is quite transparent, right? We see them exploring their environment. We see them learning how to use their toys. We see them learning how to eat, learning how to talk, walk, like all those pieces. So as they start to get a little bit older, they typically need less hands-on care, and it becomes more about supporting them as they pursue their curiosity and their interests. And part of that transition, and while it can still be busy for us because we're shifting from like keeping them alive to being more engaged in the activities that they want to do day to day, it can be like a bit of a challenge for us to notice that, to start giving them that space, to give them more space to, make some more choices that they might be interested in, to be able to, so often we've been able to help them and it's just kind of flowed and now they might be more resistant, like I want to do this, but all to start to recognize that they may think or want to do things differently than us. Like it's just really fascinating. And it can be tricky for us also because they are still so much in the moment, right? Like they want to play this thing, they want to do this thing, like they are right there. And we need to spend a lot of time learning about each other and just kind of finding our rhythms because, it's less about us when we bring the food out. Now they can like be more actively saying, I'm hungry now. Just all those little pieces, or I'm not tired, or like when they're more verbal, now they're like have more ways to express their feelings and their thoughts. And so, us learning to kind of step back a little bit and working with that with them and learning more about them. And it's a really fun time, but definitely can be a transition.
Right. And I think, with the younger kids, with babies and toddlers, I mean, it's such an intense time, right? Because we're tired and we're maybe not getting the sleep. And it is a lot about just keeping this little human alive. And there's so much joy there and so much delight. And it does, like you do see this transition that happens, and our days look a little bit different, and we can start to, recognize that pushback. So I love the way you said that, because I think especially, for those of us that, are doing a lot of the caretaking of the children, we're just so connected to those babies and toddlers, in many ways. And it's such a dependent relationship. And then you start to see that kind of independence and agency, asserting itself, wanting, and they do look at the world a little bit differently. And then we start seeing, okay, people are different. And honestly, I believe even babies and toddlers will assert themselves, but it does have a different feel to it, when getting a little bit older. And I think for those of us who we're talking about in an unschooling environment, when it becomes that more typical school age or preschool age, we start to kind of go, wait, or should we be doing these things, or should it look a different way? And I love, I read John Holt really early on. He was influential in my journey with this. And I love just kind of looking at that toddler and very young child and seeing how much they were learning, and seeing how natural it was to learn a language, and cultural, expectations and understandings and all of these pieces, and recognize that that's just something as humans we can carry through. But I think it is important to watch in ourselves. Are we bringing something to it because it's like, okay, now they would be doing this, or they should be doing this, or this kind of looking externally versus looking at the child in front of you. So I think there's a lot of things that goes on with this transition, both in our heads and for the actual child that's growing and changing.
Yeah, I definitely found that to be true. I have strong memories of, my oldest maybe turning 2, 3, 4, and just having these feelings of like, I'm supposed to be doing something that needs to be really learning now, like it's time. And I mean, really, that was just all because of the culture that I'm
Yeah.
surrounded by. When I start hearing that the friends are going to school, or, different things like that. And so but it was interesting to see that in myself and be like, on one hand, I am seeing all the learning that he's doing and our lives are great and fine. And then on the other hand, these fears are popping up of like, but should he be doing this? And so I think that transition from toddlers to children for me felt like having kids on my body at all times, to now like being able to watch them, like they're not right on me, but I'm like watching them do things. And I just remember, having just long days of sitting and watching them explore things, and setting things out for them to explore. And it's just right, it's a different phase of life, and you see all the changes that they're going through in their brains, and just in what they want to do, and seeing their kind of personalities come out, and like their voice, like you were saying, Pam, like now they're able to really tell us about their feelings, tell us about their ideas. And so as that begins, it's a big transition for us as parents, because we go from really just caretaking and responding to physical needs and things like that, to now it's another person, and it's this relationship of like, what do they need and what do I need? What do they want to do, and what can I do? What do I have the capacity for? And so, yeah, that was a big transition age for me, and I loved it.
Yeah, I mean, all the different, times and seasons are so fun and interesting, and so much to learn for myself and for kids. And so now we'll kind of move into the next, which is a bit broad, but like kind of that older child to preteen, because so much is happening during that time as well. And I found, and just again, as Pam was talking about through our experiences with hundreds, probably thousands of families at this point, um, age 8 and 9 seemed to be a big transition age for kids in terms of, I think it's, so you kind of went from that toddler to this like really engaged in the moment, doing things and really just having fun and playing. And then there's something about 8, 9, where for some kids, it is this, the first start, the first hints. We'll see other phases of this as they get older, but the first hint of there's this bigger world, and am I safe? And what's happening? And like, I love the way you said it too, Eric. It's like we're tending to kind of these physical needs and some emotional needs too, but I think it starts getting more complex as we get to that 8 to 10 is the beginning of that. And then it amps up even more in terms of just how they relate to other people. They're curious about that. They see other people. They're not quite as focused in the moment in front of them as more understanding of like social dynamics and other things that are happening. And so it's the start of that. And so I think it's interesting because in so many ways it's less hands-on. And then in other ways, it's actually gets kind of more intense as they get older in terms of the stakes seem a little bit higher or the conversations are a little bit more. So I don't know. So I'm interested about to talk about this stage too, because this one also leads us into the start of hormones.
Yeah, I mean, I do remember that season as they do start to like just notice there is more than like the family,
Yeah.
and there's this bigger world out there. And it is really interesting to put the focus on helping them as they figure it out. Like, as we talked about so much, there is like this way that, our culture is like, it's almost like exposure therapy, as in, like, okay, as they're noticing these things, we want to help them get used to it. Because yes, you are going to be seeing people. Yes, you are going to be going out and doing these things. Like, that is what life's about. So, if you're struggling with that, let's do that more so you get used to it, right? Versus trying helping them process and move through the transition at their speed. Like, we had times when somebody did not want to be going out. They wanted to be staying home. They felt much more comfortable there. And that outside world was looking a bit scary to be out and about. And even maybe fears of other people, like people in their family being out and about, right? They're starting to recognize, you know, uh, the way they've had some experiences with people passing on, or things like that, or accidents happening, that they're becoming cognizant of some more of the risk as well. So it really was a time, and it differs per child, but we have definitely seen that pattern where anxiety and stress comes with recognizing that bigger picture. And so to be able to like quiet those outer voices and really focus on our child and help them through the experience and the stages, like to be there processing to, like, I remember that was a time when we were just like pulling into our kind of our comfort zone. We were cocooning sometimes, and really just making their space comfortable for them, because I didn't want to put more anxiety and more stress on top of what they were already processing and trying to work through. Like, the more I could get rid of all of that, then the more they could sit with what they were feeling about that new piece. The bigger, this world is bigger, stuff happens out there, all those pieces. So just to give them the space to sit with that without without loading school on top of it, without loading all the stress of making them do these things so they got used to it. It was just so very helpful. And yes, a pretty darn common thing, I think.
Right. Yeah. I feel like it comes up for some families of like, I don't know what's going on with my kid. So something is different. Something has changed. They're not having fun doing the same things they used to, or, there's just this kind of maybe an increased seriousness that can happen sometimes with kids in that age. But it makes sense. It's just that increased awareness of everything, like putting themselves into some kind of place in the world. And so that's big. And it's a lot of big thoughts that can come up. And so I feel like I want to mention now, though it applies to every stage, like just the idea of meeting the child in front of you each day rather than coming to them with, I know who you are. Don't write the story of who they are. Just see who you're going to meet today, because there are these transitional times where you don't really know what to expect, and to give them the space to just be who they are each day is really amazing for them, that it's okay. It's okay that, like, some days they wake up and they have a lot of fears and anxiety about things, or they wake up and they're like, I don't think I want to do the same game that I've been really having fun with. It doesn't seem as fun to me right now, and I'm not sure what I want to do next. Those kind of feelings of I'm not as interested in what I used to be interested in can sometimes almost feel like a what's wrong with me kind of a moment for a child. And so, us being there with patience and understanding and validation of like, this happens and it's happened to me and it's common and it's normal. And, we have plenty of time, like we talked about in the last episode, to let new things bubble up. And as you grow, as we all grow and change, our interests will change, our brains will change, we'll get new ideas and new things, new feelings about our lives. And so, yeah, I found that time to be super interesting with my kids. But now we're a little bit beyond that. So are you ready for teenagers? Should I move on to teenagers? Okay, so
I think we can. Yeah.
my youngest is now 13, my oldest is 15. So this kind of young teenager age, I feel like it does seem to kind of flow and make sense from that 8, 9, becoming aware of the bigger world.
Yeah.
Then we come into this young teenager age. But there is something special about the adolescence that is different than that preteen phase. And a lot of new feelings come up. A lot of brain development happens, like a ton of brain development happens. And so it really can, in many cases, feel like, who is my child? Who is this person? It's like meeting a new person. It can be. Not everyone is quite so dramatic, but for me, I do feel like there were huge things that's like, okay, I thought it was like that, and now you're like this. And so um I have been reading this book by Dr. Dan Siegel called Brainstorm, which is about like the adolescent brain. And so he says adolescence is like from, maybe 12 years old to 24. So it's really quite a long period of this really, expanding brain, changing brain. And a couple of the things that he mentions that are special about teenagers are this emotional spark. So that's that moodiness that we talk about with the hormones and, just lots of strong emotions. Maybe like we feel sometimes we're back in the toddler days of like the like tantrumy feeling emotions, where it's just like overtaken with emotion. Social engagement becomes a lot more important to them, novelty seeking, and then creative exploration, which is what we see in teenagers. And so I don't know. I really am loving this phase. I've heard a lot from other unschooling parents that the teenage years are just so much fun because we are giving the kids space to really figure out who they are rather than trying to control and direct their path. And I think that feels so far to me kind of the key to this phase.
Yeah, the no expectations, because it's oh yes, so much. Because I mean, I actually loved having teens. I loved teens even before I had teens, so I was kind of excited to be, because I just think teens are so amazing because they're thinking all the time, about all these different things, and they have all these cool ideas and new perspectives. They haven't been weighed down by time like the rest of us have, and so it's really fun to really get into that. But I do want to say I also probably did the most work on myself during that time, in that I had to separate myself, like in terms of recognizing, like, okay, they're on their own journey, right? And I can't control that journey. When we have this baby that we can pop in the sling and go, like, it's and comfort, because that's all they want is to be close to us, and that's it. It's harder when there's things we can't comfort right away. We had some dark times during our teen years. And that was okay too, but it was a lot of work to go, this is okay, this is the human experience, and I want to be here. And like you said, just meeting the person in front of me with unconditional love and acceptance along the way. But I really have, there's a couple kind of broader things I just want to throw out in terms of, I do have seen, I had two girls and still do, they're old now though, but and I've seen lots of girls in that age, and that particular age can be really intense. And I think it can be for boys too, but it seems to play out a little bit differently. And maybe just personalities more than gender, but that kind of 12 to 15, 16, because I think they're really they're pulling away, they're coming back, they're pulling away, they're mad, there's all the hormones, their bodies are changing dramatically. It's a really intense and challenging time. And the moment I got caught up in myself about it was when we had trouble. Like if I'm making it about me, or I'm getting my feelings hurt, or, those kind of things, it's like, that's where we would derail, when I just recognize, like, this is really hard. Like what they're experiencing and learning about themselves and about the world is really hard, and could give space for that. It just made it's so much easier. And again, easy is relative. But what I also found is they do come out of the other side of it, because I do feel like there was dramatic kind of personality changes that I noticed during that time, as they're trying things on and figuring out who they are and getting a little bit more moody and dark. And then they kind of come out of it and you're like, oh, this is cool, because it's bits of the child that you knew, and it's bits of this younger teenager that you saw developing, and then it's bits of this older person that will come. And it's such a special experience, I think, we get as unschoolers, and choosing to be together all of this time that we are, to see that human development in that way. It's just really special. And I think if we don't get caught up in the expectations, or the trying to tunnel in, it can make a really big difference.
Yeah, I loved your point of the different parts of it, like the pulling away, the more out and about, and then the coming in, the out and in, like knowing that there's a safe space to kind of come back to and recenter and reground. But what was really interesting was, for me anyway, that you can feel like, okay, they're teens, they're pretty self-sufficient now, right? They can get their own food, they can, go to sleep, and like they can get dressed, all those pieces, and they're going out and about more. Um, and so you can kind of feel like, oh, okay, like now I'm not needed so much and I can go out and do all the things. So, but what I learned was, and we've talked about this before, but I found I was actually needed just as much during this time, but it looked different because it wasn't a day-to-day ongoing need. It was more like not needed for a day, a week, a month, 3 months, and then needed like every day for another period of time, as they came back in and they were processing and they were figuring stuff out. And the questions were like, that's why I think it's so much about our work for ourselves at this time, because the questions aren't, how do I do this? I want to go do this thing. Can you pick up this thing for me? So it was less about interests and more about themselves, and processing like who they want to be and how they fit into the world and how they engage with other people. And the work to separate ourselves and to really be able to see it through their eyes and understand, who they are and who they're wanting to become, and not judging that as they're trying on maybe different personality pieces, maybe just different lenses to see something and go, oh my gosh, I would never like have that take on that situation. But that is like, they aren't they aren't owning that. That's not, therefore they're looking at it this way, so therefore that's the way they're going to look at it forever. No, they are exploring, they're learning, they're trying things on, they're figuring stuff out. So when we can separate, like feeling like we're being judged by them, right? And we can just really see them for who they are. And like you're saying, like, who is this person this morning? right? It's like, that's okay because they are just trying on so many things and putting together. And like, as you were saying, as they come out the other side, kind of, Anna, it's like they're picking up that, okay, this is what resonated. Like, I missed that part of me as a child. And oh yeah, I do, because maybe they're ignoring it for a while and they're trying other pieces. Like, no, I missed
Yeah.
that piece of me. And that's something I want to bring with me as I move forward. And I found this new piece and I really like that. And right now I want to mix that in. So yeah, you never kind of know what mix you're going to get each day, which was just so curious and fun. And it was just so interesting and fascinating to kind of tag along and learn all the different things that they were pursuing, they were trying on. Also, absolutely not easy at times but when it wasn't easy, that felt like time for me to work on myself. And it's also not
Yeah.
easy for them, like understanding that. So then I also like, okay, not only work on myself, so not bring me in it, but to be able to help them process and move through that you know, and whether they're internal processors or external processors. For an internal processor, maybe it's me giving them space. Maybe it's me giving them just showing extra care during that time. And after they've processed it internally, being open and available for any conversation they want to have at that point. Or the external processor is like talking about it again and again and over and over and over and over. So it's so different for each child. It's so different for a child at different points. Like, it's a beautiful, beautiful season. And I don't like thinking about it as hard, but it kept me on my toes. It kept
Yeah.
me reminding myself who I wanted to be. It kept me, just being open, being curious, being empathetic, and just like seeing through another person's eyes. And that has never steered me wrong. Child, teen, or adult, you know what I mean? But
Mhm.
yes, it is passionate in that season.
I had something pop in my mind while I was thinking about that. So I remember my mom, like in retrospect, so recently talking about my teen years. And so all three of us, my brother, sister, and I are really close in age. And so she had a lot of intensity of teenagehood all at once together. And she said that at first it was really shocking how much our emotions, like our kind of emotional explosions, had like suddenly increased. And it just felt like it was like all the time this heightened emotion. And so at first she was kind of getting amped up with us, like we were angry. And so then she's trying to, kind of meet us there and she'd get angry and upset. And we'd like have these kind of, fights in a way, arguments or whatever. And then she's like, but then I realized like how quickly you would move through that emotional outburst. And I would still be sitting here like, what just happened? And still feeling upset. And she's like, so I just stopped like going on the emotional ride. And I was just like,
Yeah.
they're okay, And so I think that that's a good kind of it's kind of like the not taking it personally, but just not like letting them have their experience but not getting worked up into it where it's like I have to solve everything. I need to get myself all worked up and heightened. And so being that calm presence, being there at the end of it, being there to support through it, like those things are super important to me with my teens now.
Yeah, so much. I like the roller coaster analogy. It's like we can be right there next, watching and being there and when they get off, but we don't have to ride that because honestly, I did do that at times and ended up feeling like I'd been run over by a truck and then they're off doing fine. And I'm like, wait a minute, and so then I had that recovery time, but it wasn't my journey, it wasn't mine to do, but I could still be there. And that reminded me of something that kind of came up as you all were talking is just, the connection and the supporting autonomy and agents that we do when they're younger really lends itself to this time because like that foundation is so helpful during the teen years because as they go off, they do come back, and when something happens that doesn't feel great or off or whatever, they know that there's no judgment and that they can talk about it and that we'll be there. And I think that was such an important part for me, because I felt they were safer that way. I felt like that, because some people worry about the safety in this, and it was like, I felt so good about our connection that I knew they would come back if they needed something, and I was there. And with that, unconditional loving presence. And so that's what I wanted to work on. Like, I wanted to make sure I was doing the work for myself, that I could show up in that way. And I thought it was just, it helped us through those times, because again, there's a lot of, kind of lability, and again, the going off and coming back. And it's a really beautiful time, though. And again, I learned so much about myself, and I learned so much just about being in relationship with other humans.
No, I think so. And I think it's also just to point out too, when we talk about it feeling good, etc. But it's not about, oh, I'm feeling good, and ultimately they're going to make choices that I'm comfortable with, right?
No.
And that's what I think, as you were talking there, Anna, it's like I too felt like the relationship and the connection was the foundation that I needed, and like the non-judgmental kind of environment. It doesn't mean non-judgmental doesn't mean, oh, therefore I have to agree with every choice that they make. Like, I can say I would never make that choice. That choice like just fills me with uncomfortableness. Yet, if seeing through your eyes, I can kind of see how you got, even if they kind of, like, yeah, I will make that choice again. I tried it out, didn't like it, etc. So yeah, it's not about them, about us being okay, like totally comfortable with every choice that they make or everything that they do. But as you were saying, like knowing that they have, or feeling that they have a space that they can come back to, even when they're like, holy crap, this did not go the way I was expecting when I left at, at this time, or, off they went for something, or this relationship that they thought, it went completely sideways. Like, it's not about them being totally happy with how things go and us being totally happy with how they're, moving through their days. But that foundation of the relationship, so that they know there's a place they can come to process that, to talk about that, where they can get support and help and ideas for moving through for where they find themselves now. Right? I think that foundationally, I think is what we found to be helpful, so that they didn't feel like, I've screwed up and I'm on my own, which just means, there's a much greater chance that it's just going to keep going more and more sideways, right? Like, till they find the spot where it's like, oh, okay, I think I need some input. I think I would like some help, whatever, whether it's just conversation or like, come pick me up, any of those moments that we have that relationship where they are at least feel comfortable enough to do that, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
for sure.
So are we
There's a
ready?
piece.
Oh, you
Wait.
want to go?
Oh,
Go
okay.
ahead,
Well,
Ann.
tell me where you're going, and then I'll see where this fits in.
I'm going to the next one. I'm
Okay.
going
I think I wanted
yeah.
okay, I think I'm going to do this here, because I'm a little bit worried it may go sideways, but we're going to try, because this is something I heard a really long time ago, and there are parts of the language of it that I don't love, but it actually was helpful to me. And that was, when we're looking at the learning of, unschooled children, because that's kind of what we're talking about here, as they grow. I remember somebody saying, and this was 5 years ago, probably, that in the beginning, when they're young and they're toddlers and they're young, they are ahead. You see them like they're just learning machines. You see the learning. It's so easy to see all the things that they're learning and doing. And you just see like, wow, like they're not being pinned in by first grade that you have to do. They're learning about, bones and paleontology and, all these things when they're young. And then there's kind of this middle age where they look more behind. And basically it's because there's a lot of language at school, like in terms of particular math functions or, these kind of things that actually don't apply to really everyday life. Like they're things that we aren't even using now. And so our kids, when they're in that kind of middle age that we're talking about now, this kind of preteen, early teen age, they're just diving deep into their interests, which may or may not include the quadratic equation, that the neighbors are talking about. And so then it's like, oh, okay, so how does that fit in? And then this next phase that we're about to go to, Pam, with this kind of older age, you see like, oh, wow, what they know is how to learn, how to figure things out, how to be in the world, how to be in relationship, how to go and pursue the things that they're interested in, because that's what they've been fostering all along. And so then they look, quote, ahead again, because then you've got these people that are kind of struggling in college because they were supposed to go there, but they don't know what they want to do. And they don't really have a sense of like who they are. And you see that. And so I don't know, it was kind of helpful for me. And I've seen it play out over the years to just wreck it. And it's part of what we talked about last time. Like it's a long game. And so if you're taking any slice along the way, whether it's, oh, look how much they know and how amazing, like if you're hanging on those like external pieces, you're gonna find yourself, I think, not in the best place, But if you look at it as a long game of like, what's happening? Am I showing up for this person that's showing up in front of me? Are we connected? Am I facilitating? Are we living our life? I don't know. So I just wanted to share it because it was interesting and helpful to me at different times. So I'm putting it out there, and now we can go to you could have thoughts, but we can also go to the
Well, I was just gonna say
transition.
like those outside, it's kind of like a description of the outside messages that we'll receive. Like those
Right,
are the
right,
outside messages we'll receive when they're so little. It's like, oh my gosh, they're so amazing. And then as they get bigger, but do they know the math,
right.
all these times tables or whatever? And then, right, the next one is like, wow, this young adult is so amazing. So the outside messages that we receive at these different transition times are so strong and so particular and so cultural. And so it'll trigger those memories in us at those different ages. And, it just brings up so much. So this is kind of like our internal work to do to put it all in perspective.
Right.
It's a long
To
game.
put it all in perspective. Yes, that's what I wanted to get from it, because I think there's value to understanding those messages are rooted in something different. And we're looking at it in a very different way, this long game, this whole human experience.
Yes. And, depending on when start unschooling, if you are
True.
doing it and you get all those like early messages like, oh man, that's amazing and everything. And it can really throw you for a loop when it's like, okay, now they're talking about their science experiments and their more detailed math and like all those pieces that are like, it is the curriculum kind of changes to what's apparently more advanced, etc. Yet our child is like right into whatever their interest is. And and maybe that interest looks schoolish, right? But maybe it doesn't. So it's
Yeah.
so helpful and fascinating for us to, again, do that personal work to see, oh, are we like using those external messages to validate ourselves in our choice to do this? Because that'll eventually
Mhm.
shoot you in the foot at some point.
Yeah.
Oh, one way or the other. But yes, okay, this last transition, and we are talking teen into young adult years. I loved your adolescence piece, Erica, up to the age of 24. Yeah, I can totally see
Yeah.
that. And I will put in the show notes a link to our podcast episode earlier about what's so magical about age 18, because that is a whole nother world of outside messages that come up
Yes.
during this transition. That whole like, okay, but what about college? But what are they gonna what job? All those pieces that can come up, and it's yet another, stage of work for us to do. But also, back to supporting our kids. And the thing is, now they've hit an age where they too hear all those messages too. So there's processing sometimes for them to do as well. But also, maybe I was going to say maybe they found their thing, but also like they're still exploring. Like
Mhm.
again, it doesn't need to be, oh, you're 18 and now you need to look like this, right? It's like, oh my gosh, you can keep being you because you're awesome. And, to be able to support them through that is just, again, like it feels super fun. As long as you've done the work so that, you aren't being buffeted. Yeah, that's because sometimes from some people,
Yeah.
messages are that's awesome. And sometimes it's, what about this? And like, if you find yourself being buffeted around, like, yeah, those are clues. It's like, okay, I need to kind of do some work and figure out why I'm being affected by all these outer messages and like find that foundation in because unschooling from my blog post to these hundreds of podcast episodes, it really is about being a human in the world. It really isn't. It eventually quickly it becomes not really about school at all. School or
Yeah.
not school isn't really the fundamental question, right? So just to help them and support them and engage with them as they make these transitions. And it's not really age dependent. It really is to do with the person and what they want to explore next. And the piece of personality is just so fast. Now we've got lots of years to look back on, right? And we can start to see the threads. Oh, yeah, when you were interested in that
Yes.
thing, I thought it was about that thing, but really it was just about this slice of that thing. And now I can see how you grab these various slices and brought them together. And now I can see how, you're wanting to move forward in this direction. It's super interesting and fascinating. And also, we're not going to label you and say, now you are this for the rest of your life. It's just it is a really fun stage, but again, it's like there's just so much, right? There's so much with moving out, there's so much with college, there's so much with, maybe someday like doors aren't closed either as much because we don't have that expectation that at 18 you do this and then you do this, right? It's much more about them feeling it out and seeing what feels good for them, but and because I hesitate to say feels good for them because, for people listening, that might be like, oh, well, they're not going to do anything hard if they're only going to do what feels good. But that's
Mm.
not really what it is because it can feel good to do really challenging things because like I want the thing on the other side, so it doesn't doing things that feel good doesn't mean that they're always easy, which I think people
Yeah.
can equate with, especially in the young adult years, right? It's easy maybe to make the culturally acceptable choices, right? And there's processing in making other kinds of choices, but man, sometimes those other choices just fit that person like a glove, don't they?
Yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, I really do recommend that other episode for sure, because that was a really good in-depth conversation of this age period. But yeah, just what comes to mind for me is that learning is lifelong. There's no finish line. I think I talked about on that one, like the idea of like how's this child going to turn out when they're an
Yeah.
adult kind of thing, like that idea. It's not about turning out because we're all still learning and growing and changing. And
I'm
so
still turning out. Yeah.
I feel like that's kind of the thing to keep grounding in when we have the young adult children. It's just like it's still, you still have all the options. You still are allowed to grow and change, and there's no one right way.
Yeah, and that's the piece for me too, right? And I love that you mentioned the threads, Pam, because I even think about my own life and the different jobs and careers and interests that I've had over, my 55 years. It's like, oh, there are these interesting threads, and I think that can be really cool. And but it didn't always look traditional. It didn't always look like what they kind of sell you that, you're going to go to college and get one job and you'll have a job until you retire. Like this is not really how it works anymore, even for our generation, and much less so for the people behind us. And I think that is something that I really have enjoyed watching. And when you were talking about it feels good, I mean, I will say there's been times for both of my, adult kids that it hasn't felt good. Like they're trying to figure out, like, I don't know, this doesn't feel good. What do I want to do? And that's part of it too, because I've been there as well. Like, what do I want to do next? What does this make sense? Am I happy in the choices that I've made? How do I want to do it? And so what I love is that what I'm trying to, just kind of leave space for them to see is that, yeah, that's kind of life, that we have these opportunities and these times and we can figure things out. And if we don't like it, we can switch and pivot because I think, in the work that I do now, working with individuals and couples and families, it's like I see so many older adults that are not so happy, that really have gone along someone else's path and it didn't serve them, and so I do think this time for our kids that are growing up into adulthood and figuring it out, it can be bumpy still, but there's a connection piece that's different, and there's just this understanding that there's not one right way, and that we can try different things, and that that's okay. That there's no judgment about that, and so that piece I really love about what we can bring to everyone, because I think really everyone wants that unconditional love and acceptance. And so I love, kind of being able to offer that to these teens and young adults where it can feel so fraught. I have a client right now who is in college about to graduate, and oh my gosh, I just feel for her. Like has a traditional, kind of mainstream upbringing, but it's not even that. It's just, it's such a big weighty time. She's putting so much weight. And when I'm introducing to her the idea of it's okay for you to change your mind, like you could do that for a little while and then change your mind. She's like, what? And so I love just introducing that idea to all of us that we don't have to bring so much weight to everything. I think my kids taught me that too when they were little. Like, we don't have to bring so much weight to all the decisions. We can learn and pivot no matter what happens. So,
I had one other thing pop into my
yeah.
mind, which I think is for kind of all these different transitional ages and these seasons that we go through. Like, sometimes there could be something that feels really challenging. Um, and so we resist it, or we want them to get through that phase,
Yeah.
get through that season, or
Yeah.
I just can't wait till the next age because this is so challenging. You know what I mean? But and we've talked about this on the network so many times and probably on the podcast too, but like just the idea that nothing lasts forever, but being okay with it lasting forever is often the
Yeah.
key for it to
Yeah.
be able to change. So the more we're holding on to, like, I just hope they
Yeah.
change, sometimes the less likely it is for them to move through that. And so I think that happens, we can do that for ourselves as adults when our lives are challenging and we're going through a hard time, but we can also do it, when our kids are going through a hard time, just kind of coming to that acceptance of, even if this lasts forever, we're going to make it through. And then it sometimes just that release can help bring, I don't know, just like a different mindset. It's more, you give yourself space to be more open and curious about what could happen.
Yeah. We're
Yeah,
exactly where we need to be.
Mhm.
exactly. Like, and I love that you brought that up because that has been my experience when things would just get so like, oh my gosh, when is this going to be over? Not that I'm saying that to them, but I'm feeling it. I don't know. That energy really comes. And when I can get to a place, you know what? The world isn't over, even if it's like this forever. Because then I can release the need for change and get back to that openness and see all of a sudden I see more possibilities with things
Right.
being this way. And you don't know that magic, but that energy, like with them and my engagement with them, is obviously must be different somehow, even if I feel like I'm not really saying anything different. The energy that I'm bringing to it, and like so often, yes, that felt like it was the catalyst in them being able to release too. Like we must have been kind of energetically stuck with each other. And now they could release anything they were feeling from me and just really feel into themselves. And they would find like just a new baby step in a new direction. That's fascinating to see in action, isn't it?
Yes.
All right. So I think we have covered this one enough. I want to thank everybody very much for joining us. I hope you found something interesting in this conversation. I really enjoyed talking about the different seasons like alongside each other, because then we get to see the threads that are common to these different stages, even though they can look very, very different. And please remember to check out the Living Joyfully shop and the Living Joyfully network, because I know Erica talked about how much she loved that, but I know Anna and I do too so much. They're amazing families in there, and it is just like our kids are long long grown adults, and we still like find it just so fascinating to be engaging with parents who are intentional and who've had like wide-ranging different lives and experiences. So it is a lovely place, and we definitely invite you to join us there. And we wish everyone a lovely week. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.